Great, and we're live. So welcome everybody to this remote interview. My name is Lisette, and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And today on the line, very exciting, I have Mariana Rego, and you're in Miami, Florida. You're the co-founder of Leadwise, which is a new initiative from Ricardo Semler. And you also run the Design Thinking Meetup in Miami. And you'll tell us about your 12-week Design Thinking course that also just came out. So welcome and thanks for being on this podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And I want to start with the first question, which I always start with, which is, what does your virtual office look like? What do you need to get your work done?
So I think all I need to get my work done is my computer and a pair of headphones, and then I can pretty much do work anywhere. I think that's probably true out of a lot of people who are listening today, right? As long as you have both and good Wi-Fi, you're able to get your work done. I recently spent a month traveling in Brazil, and I was in like 5 different cities, and that was all I needed to be able to get my work done.
Okay, so let's learn more about Leadwise and talk about that. And then I want to talk a bit about more how you work, because like you're saying, you just need your laptop and an internet connection and you're plugged in. So I definitely want to get into that. But tell us about Leadwise. What is this?
So Leadwise is a new initiative that we started with Ricardo Semler, who's one of the leaders of the democratic management movement. For those of you who might not have heard of Ricardo, he's written several books about people-centric management, and he was one of the pioneers of taking his factory in Brazil in the 1980s and giving power back to the employees, treating the employees like they are adults instead of children who need to be supervised. And his company then experienced a lot of growth and very low employee turnover because of these policies that really worked. So he is an incredible person who's done a lot to change the way that companies run and are managed and give us examples of what is possible. And it's a really great honor to be able to work with him and learn from him and to create Leadwise, which is an educational experience, I would say. We're creating right now, we're startups. It's very much a work in progress, but what we want to do is we want to help people transform the way they lead in the age of wisdom, which we believe we're coming from. We had the industrial age in the 1800s of industrialization. We've had the information age in the latter part of the 20th century. Now in the 21st century, it's not only about information, it's about leading wisely and managing wisely and living wisely. So we believe that in this transition, there are different ways of managing and working, and we want to be playing a part in that and help people that want to go through that transformation.
And do you think that the remote working is helping to is remote working helping to cause this shift in leadership? Is that that probably amongst many things is what's driving this initiative, but how do you see that playing out?
That's definitely crucial. In the past, it was less possible. Things that people such as Ricardo were positing in the 80s were less possible because you weren't able to work remotely. And now that we have this possibility, greater freedom is possible. The whole Leadwise team, we're all remote. We have people all over, mostly in Brazil and the United States at this point, but some people they travel, so they might be in Europe, they might be anywhere else. So we all work remotely. We've never all been in the same room, and our meeting room is Zoom, and our office is Slack. So, and we managed to get a lot done, and it's really great. And we are an example of something that's being created through remote work.
And why is it that you guys decided to work remotely yourselves?
Because the team that was put together, the best people for the team were in different places. So it doesn't make sense to move people and get them all in one place if they are happy with their lives and working on what they think is interesting. It's not necessary these days, right? It's nice, but there's the possibility of, I've had the surreal experience of actually meeting people I've been working with for months lately, recently, and then I meet them and I'm like, oh, it's not really any different. Like I already know you and we already gelled so well that it's not really any different than being in person or being in a Zoom room with you all the time.
Right. There's probably that initial weirdness of first meeting. And then as soon as you're over that, it's just the same as if you were.
It's normal. Yeah. It's great. I mean, I'm working with people, the Leadwise folks. And then, as you mentioned, I do have a class, Design Thinking 12-week program that I'm teaching here. And that is in conjunction with a colleague in California who is a part of the Stanford University Design School community. And we were talking for months, creating the class all over Skype and over video chat. And then when I finally met him in person, when we launched, it was like, oh, hey, there you are, you know?
You might be taller or shorter than I expected.
Yeah. Like, you're really tall. You're really, really tall, but otherwise great. You know, we already know each other and we already work so well together.
That's funny. So what challenges did you guys run into as a team when you were working? I mean, I'm sure we'll get into like, clearly it's working well because you're doing it. But what was some of the things that you guys struggled with?
Yeah, setting deadlines and like making sure, because everybody, we run ourselves as a democratic company as well. So people are responsible for their own deliverables and figuring out what needs to get done and running with that, and figuring out what's the best way so we have a structure that everything's delivered when it should be in a timely manner. That was, I think, our biggest challenge, but we figured it out. We have deliverables that are due on Wednesday, for example, and some that are due on Friday. And we figured out that we have one big deadline, and then people are free to figure out how to do the little things that they're needed to accomplish that.
Okay. And how do you know what each other are doing on the team?
We're on Slack all the time. That's pretty much it. And it's fun. I mean, I personally communicate visually a lot. So for me, I think being remote, that's one of the challenges. So I installed several GIF keyboards on Slack. So now we're able to convey emotion and stuff through different GIFs. And we can always hop on our Zoom team room, if anything. So we frequently do that. Sometimes we actually just will work together for hours. We started doing that recently. Just turn the cameras on and just work together and, you know, hype up when there's a question or something like that. But then you really feel like you're not alone, and that really helps us push us and propel us and keep us focused. Interesting.
So I've heard of people doing this, having these sort of group work sessions. I know in the programming world, they call it pair programming, but that's usually just like two people working together. But these sort of group work sessions seem to be becoming more and more common. It's a really good idea, I think. So how do you guys do it? You leave the video cameras on. How many are there when you're doing these kind of sessions? What does it look
3 or
like?
4 people, between 2 and 4 people, I think. I wish that Zoom, which is the tool that we use that I think is becoming more and more popular, the only problem that I have with it is that the camera doesn't stay on top if you change the window. So you can't see the people anymore unless you're like sharing a screen. But that's the only issue I have with Zoom. Skype, if you click out of Skype, you can see the person that you're talking to still. I wish that Zoom would do that as well. That way you can be working on something and still seeing the people you're talking to instead of having to click back and forth.
Right.
Yeah, but that's the only issue we have with that. But yeah, we'll just turn the camera on. Sometimes we leave the mics on. Sometimes we mute them and then just pipe up if we need. So.
Love it. Love it. And let's see. So what do you think is stopping people from working this way? Because you guys are really talking about a new way of leading, a new form of management for, I think you called it the age of wisdom. What is it that's blocking most people from going in this direction? Because it sounds really good, right? All these, all the freedom and the working and so why wouldn't somebody do this?
I think there's several reasons, right? Basically, I think humans, we all have the same set of needs that need to be met. And I think different people prioritize different needs in different ways, right? So I think that some people really prize the security and safety of having a corporate structure in an office that they go to and having a boss that tells them what to do. Some people actually really like that and enjoy that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just don't. I didn't find it satisfying in the long term for me in my corporate career. So that's why I'm here today. And I think a lot of people don't, but some people do, and that's great for them, it can be exhausting also to always be making decisions, and some people I think can experience decision fatigue. You read about that a lot in, let's say, if you're reading about some cases, let's say at Zappos, you hear that come up, that people are constantly having to decide this or that, and sometimes people just want to have that security of knowing what needs to be done. If there's too much ambiguity, maybe that's just not the right environment for some people. But I think on the manager side, I think that some people, maybe they can thrive in this environment, but their managers, their managers worked hard to get promotions and to get the status and to get the office and all these, attributes and regalia of corporate life, and they don't want to give that up, understandably so. It's markers of success to them and to society. So I think that there's definitely, I see those two sides of it. I think that maybe it's some managers want to keep the power and don't want to, or they don't understand it. I think a lot of people also jump immediately to say why it wouldn't work. I think that you probably run into that a lot, right? Like a lot of people just think that there's no way this could work, and you're like, well, have you tried it? Have you seen the examples, et cetera, right? So I think that there's that resistance. There's a resistance of the managers, and then there's, maybe it's just not for some people. Some people would prefer to have more of like a structured, know what to do. It's very concrete, and it's just this, and this is my boss, this is hierarchy, and that's comfortable for me, and that's what I want.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you like especially about working remotely, you personally?
I hate being micromanaged. And I like being able to say, it's just healthier for me to be able to say, I'm going to go make lunch now and actually make a meal if I have the time, as opposed to grabbing something, crappy on the street. And to be able to say, hey, I need a mental break, I'm going to go for a run or something like that. I really enjoy that. I think that it frees up my creativity and enables me to, and then I realized also, I feel when I worked in corporate life, there was this pressure the FaceTime pressure of being there all the time and being in front of your computer. And most of not a big chunk of the time when you're in front of your computer, you're not necessarily being like quote unquote productive. You might be staring. Oh my God, this is hilarious. I have a friend. He created I'm not going to say who he worked for, but he worked in the financial world in New York, and he created a screensaver that was a screenshot of a spreadsheet. So if his computer went dead, it looked like he was working on a spreadsheet.
Awesome. Clever.
So, but it's like, you're not really being productive. So why don't you go get inspired, get out of the room, go take a walk, go see something else, Right.
Because clearly he has ability and motivation because he built this screensaver. So clearly he's a clever guy. And wouldn't it be great if the motivation was actually on what are you producing rather than are you in your seat between the hours of 9 to 5? I think that's right. I mean, that's what I find. So I love the remote working. I love it mainly because it focuses the motivation in the right place for everybody. Even the company wins if we're all focused on results over 9 to 5. What I really like is this idea, because when you say, people need to think for themselves and they're professionals. And I really like that. It speaks to me because when I worked in an office just a few years ago, I took an office job for a number of reasons, but one of them was to experiment with it. And we had to show up by 9 a.m. And I found it so limiting. I just felt like, wow, I'm a 40-year-old woman. I feel like I'm in kindergarten, that I'm not allowed to show up after 9 a.m. What if you want to run longer? Or what if, who knows? Maybe you want to do your emails at home. I don't know. I just hated it. So this idea of this Leadwise initiative sounds so appealing because it treats people as if they're the adults and the professionals that they are, that they can make the decisions themselves. So I want to ask a little bit about your design thinking background. Tell us what design thinking is exactly.
So design thinking is a way of solving problems more creatively. It is many things, but the simplest way I think to think about it is it's a set of mindsets and tools that have been put together and are presented to people as a way to solve human problems more creatively. It's a set of tools and mindsets that is used by several of the world's leading companies, including Airbnb and Nike and Apple, to create solutions to human problems that are more than just a thing that does something. I think that there's a misconception about design. I think a lot of people think that design is putting something, a pretty aesthetic on something, when in reality, design is the act of thoughtfully solving a problem, especially human problems, right? Problems that have to do with people and how people interact in the world. And usually design thinking is great for solving what we like to call wicked problems. So problems that you don't understand necessarily what the root cause is. If you asked 3 or 4 stakeholders, they would have a different theory. So you have to spend some time. The idea of design thinking is you have to spend some time before actually going and running and solving a problem, which is what we learn in school, right? To say what's 2 + 2, it = 4, or like write a paper on this. You just go and you go with your first idea. You spend some time trying to understand the people and see what they're not telling you, and try to understand what is the actual problem that you're trying to solve, so that you're not running around and solving 4 different things because the 4 different stakeholders had 4 different visions of what the problem actually is. I love the example of, I come from way back when, I come from the engineering world. I studied industrial engineering, and all my internships and everything were either manufacturing or service engineering based. And in the engineering world, we are really taught to think about technology and how to create and implement technology. But when I was in engineering school, we were starting to get more about, that's where I learned about design thinking, about let's really think about the humans, especially in industrial engineering. We're really thinking about human factors engineering and ergonomics and how humans interact with machines. One of my favorite examples to point out the difference between approaches to solving problems, if you're just going to take the traditional approach, everybody travels, right? And then you go on an airplane, and most of the time, depending where you live in the world, you have to check your bag. You cannot take a bag that's more than like 5 kilos on a cabin. So you have to check your bag. And then you get out of the plane, and you go and you wait by the carousel, and it always takes forever for the bag to come, right? A person who's solving that problem linearly might think, well, the problem is that the bag is taking a lot of time to come. So let's go and try to shave off the time. Let's create a new process and try to shave 30 seconds, whatever. The thing is that people are really terrible at perceiving time. We don't really have a really good way of perceiving like time shifting and passing. So the person in the end might still be unhappy if it comes 30 seconds later, because they'll still feel like their time was wasted. And that's the thing. The problem is not that how long the bags are taking to come. It's the perception of their time being wasted. So a lot of airports, what they started doing is, if you take that human-centered approach instead of technological approach, they've rerouted so that it takes people longer to get to the belt, to get to the carousel. And then they get there and they walked for longer. They were doing something. And maybe it even takes longer, but they're happier because it appears to them that their time was useful. It was purposeful. Right. So I love that so much, because that's the thing. What was the problem? Was the problem that the bags were taking too long? Or what's the real problem, that people were unhappy and feeling that their time was wasted? So.
Right. It sounds like a really creative approach to looking at things in a different way. Like you could compare apples and oranges, but actually you could compare apples and bananas too. And it's kind of coming up with that third option or fourth option even.
Yeah, and iterating and going past your initial idea is something that we really encourage. In go past the obvious, get all those obvious ideas out, but really try to go crazy, when you're ideating, in that mindset, in that space, create, and then see if you can learn something from the crazy idea. And then try to bring it down to something that can be real and useful in the existing constraints of the world. But yeah, because if you're just going to solve problems in the most obvious way, you're just going to keep getting the same solutions, and maybe you're not really solving the problem. So that's what I really.
I can imagine, and I can imagine this comes in very handy when working on a team, especially with a remote team, as having this sort of, I can imagine it comes in handy anyway, whether you're co-located or remote, but especially on a remote team, when you're doing this, applying this with your remote colleagues. What do you guys use for brainstorming?
So I think that the best rule to keep in mind when you are brainstorming is that first you like really should understand the problem and not try to come up with solutions while you are working on the problem. I think that is really difficult for smart people. And I know that everybody that's listening to this is a smart person. It's difficult. We want to jump. It's like you go to the doctor, you start telling them your symptoms and they diagnose you right away. Wait, but you didn't hear the whole thing, you know? Try to listen, try to have that beginner's mindset and hear what the person is telling you, and so you don't misdiagnose them. And keep your smarts aside. Everybody knows you're smart. And then try to remove yourself from the equation and really put yourself in the shoes of the person you're designing and solving for, right? So I'm not creating a solution for me necessarily. I mean, granted, with Leadwise, it is for me. You know, I am one of the people in the demographic, but we're really thinking about what about somebody who's never heard about this before? What do they need? What about the person? Somebody told in one of my customer research interviews, somebody told me, I feel like I'm standing in front of this mountain and it looks so glorious and amazing, but I just have no idea how to climb it. And I just keep that message in my head. And then when we are in the ideation space, where we try to, don't be judgmental, really listen to the crazy ideas, and don't get attached to your own ideas. That's the problem with good ideas, right? Is that you become emotionally attached to them and then you want it to work and people don't want to hurt you. And so you start getting human psychology, and that's how sometimes awful things are launched, right? Because things that, and I say awful, like they don't solve the problem that they're aiming to, because they're all about like, oh, but I really like this idea and I want to go with it, as opposed to actually solving the problem. So it's really hard. You have to be kind of zen, I think, is the best thing for brainstorming ideation.
Right. Detach yourself a bit and just throw things out. Yeah. But it comes back to then also having a safe environment with your colleagues where you can feel free to be silly and to fail in front of them and to come up with really bad ideas and to still vocalize them. I can imagine that's pretty scary in general. How do you guys keep the culture on your team positive? How do you give each other feedback? What does that look like for you guys?
Oh man, keeping positive. So it's so easy to just get sucked in and just work all the time. And I think that, as silly as it seems, but like the gifts, like most mornings I try to send a good morning gift to the team and be like something silly and different. And that really helps. And then I think also we started doing, when we have a deliverable that we're finishing, we have like a beer summit. Where we all turn on our cameras and we're finishing it, it's done, and then we all toast with the beer. We take a screenshot of it, we share it on the Slack for whoever couldn't make it, and then we just drink beers and like talk, just chat with and get to know fun things about your colleagues, and that are not necessarily work related, because I think if you're not around people in that physically, right? When you're working remotely, it can be difficult to have like the glue, like to build the personal relationship. I think I don't have that problem because I tend to bring the personal into everything I do. Like I always bring my whole self to everything. So I'm always like, what are you doing? What do you like? I always try to find out about people and what they are. But I know that some people have more of their professional persona, and it's a little, if you're not seeing people down the hall, it's difficult for you to have those little side conversations that really build relationships. So I think having the beer summit when we have a deliverable is something that really helps. Like I found out, like for example, one of our colleagues on the team found out he was a junior like world beach volleyball champion or something when he was
cool.
In high school. And like you went, what? That's amazing. We have an elite athlete on the team, and you find out these things that if you're just working remote and just focusing on the deliverables, you're not going. So I love the idea of the beer summit that comes from one of our colleagues, other companies that he founded, and I think it's amazing. And if we forget it, we're always like, wait, we haven't had a beer summit. Like let's have one this week or something like that. I think that really, really helps. And when I'm in the cities where there are people that are part of the team, I obviously meet them. I go out and I try to like grab dinner with them and meet their families and things like that. So, but those are the two things I think.
Yeah, I think I hear a lot that you have to be deliberate and you have to really invest time in your teammates, because it's so easy to just start checking tasks off the list and keep going like, okay, video on, meeting had, check. noted, okay, gone, next thing, that you have to actually take the time to just hang out with each other, which which is it's just a little bit different, because in the office you bump into each other, but online you have to invest somehow. A little less natural. I think once you get used to it, you probably find that it feels kind of natural. And maybe it's weird to the people who are around us who are just watching, but to the people doing it, it's totally fine.
Right.
So what advice would you have for people who are just starting out or who would want to try this? What would you tell them?
Man, so I've lived the solopreneur life, and I think that can be really rough, because it's so easy to not even notice you're isolating yourself, especially, let's say, if you're working in a home office, for example. Like, I tend to work at home most of the time. Like, I've joined co-working spaces, and then in the end I just want to stay in my pajamas or yoga pants and work at home. So I think that it's easy for you to isolate yourself especially if you're not a part of a team. So it's important to seek out those people that are in the same boat, and maybe form a collaborative or something like that, where you can have that support of people going through the same thing as you. When I was doing the mostly solo thing, I mean, I had partners, but they were both doing different things, and it was I was more involved in the day-to-day. I felt like I was going crazy sometimes. Like, nobody understands what I'm feeling. So for those of you out there that are in the solo world, form a team somehow. Find the companionship of people that are also doing the solo thing, or maybe, go and join a co-working space or something. Get out of the house too. I find that sometimes, because I enjoy just staying at home and just not commuting. I sometimes forget to leave. So last Thursday, I was like, this is ridiculous. I just left and went to sit and look at the ocean. Like, I live in Miami, Florida. Why am I indoors all the time? So I needed that so much, and I felt so inspired when I came back. But I've seen what it's like to work when you have the support of people. And maybe if your project or your company is just you and you don't have that online support of people, try to be around people. And I don't think being in a coffee shop really does it necessarily, because of the personal connections. Like, do invest in a co-working space or with other people, or join a collaborative. We have them here in Miami, like a collaborative of freelancers. I'm sure they are, and they meet and they co-work together. And I'm sure there are other even more amazing things in other places. But I think that just being hauled up on your own is you don't even notice that you're isolating yourself. And it's important to remind yourself to step out.
Right. I have the same. I love working in my home office. And every once in a while I think, how long has it been since I've actually encountered another real person? Like, quick, get out of the house. Even if it's just for a walk, it can be good. But you're right. It's very easy to isolate oneself. And now there's so many meetups, and you can even co-work online. But getting out is easier and easier. But you're right. Finding the balance, I think, is something a lot of freelancers struggle with. So, especially when we work on things we like, because then it's even harder to stop because we really don't want to. It's sort of like you have to force yourself to stop. So great advice. And let's see. Oh, I want to talk about one last thing before I ask the last question, which is virtual team management, because Leadwise is really, it sounds like it's really for management and for leaders. What would you say to people who want to manage or lead a virtual team? What do they need to know?
A lot.
Yeah, it's a big question, I realize.
Let me I think that number one thing is that the regular, and this is remote or physical, working together in the same spot. I think in general, the employer-employee relationship has a lack of trust inherent on both sides. And that's why employees are not treated as adults, like you said, like, why do you have to be here at 9? And things like that. I think that starting from a place of trust and trusting your people is important. You have to make sure you have the right people on the team. And if they're not the right people, there will, maybe they're not going to be on the team, and that's fine. I understand that there's challenges around that, but I think that you have to start from a basis of trust with everything that you do. And especially since you're not around people, if you're managing remote or like just working remote, like we don't, we're a very flat structure. And I think that most remote teams are flat structures as well. If you're remote, it's easy to misinterpret sometimes things that people say or why they didn't do something because you don't get the full context, right? So strategy is really important, and not, assume that thing that there's anything negative, I think is really important, always coming from that place of trust and positivity. And then I would say also, like, always be asking why about everything. That's just a good life lesson in general. But why is the question, and always ask why this, why that is, I think, the most important thing. I don't really see much difference between this and Zen, to be honest.
Are you there again?
Hello?
Hello.
Hi,
And we're
I'm
still
back.
recording. How strange. We just zipped out and zipped back on. So you were saying that you didn't see much difference between this and Zen. And I was just about to agree with you in terms of there does seem to be a lot of overlap. So assuming positivity and getting context and asking questions and being curious. It does seem like there is a lot of overlap. So really good, not only remote lessons to learn, but also just life lessons in general, and ways of behaving. So I really, really like that. So I guess the last question is, before our tech luck runs out, not sure what's happening on the tech. There's always something with remote working, right? There's just things you have to deal with. Is what's the best way for people to get in touch with you and to learn more about Leadwise and to design thinking?
So to learn more about Leadwise, you can go to leadwise.email. That's literally is our URL, leadwise.email. And then you can that's our page, and you can find out more about it there. And then you can just register your email, and you receive more information about email. And to get in touch with me, the best way is to reach out to me on Twitter. It's Mariana C as in Cat Rego. And then you can ask me any questions. All my links to the Design Thinking Miami and the Leadwise and everything else social are on there. So I think that's the best way to get in touch with me if anyone has any questions about any of that.
I hope they do get in touch with you. Please let me know when you do. I like to hear that that movement has happened through these interviews. It happens a lot. So that's always very nice. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk today. Sue, I could go on and on. But thank you so much today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been amazing to get to know you and share my experiences, and I can't wait to hear what everybody else has to say about this awesome topic that I really care about. So thank you.
It's very clear you care about it. Love it. All right, everybody. Until next time, be powerful.